All right, we're going to start with the responsibilities of the state clerk. So when you talk about 4.5 hours a week, yeah, good luck on that. The interesting thing for me is that let's see. If you go to the new form of government and you go back and you look up clerk, there's not a lot of times that it's actually mentioned. There are implications, however. There are specific things that stated clerks constitutionally are responsible for. It may not actually say your name per se, but it's there. First and foremost is it really does talk about your responsibilities regarding rolls and records. That your responsibility is to be sure that all the transactions of your council, of your presbytery, of your synod are accurate. That you're to keep the rolls of the membership and the attendance at the meetings, the membership of who belongs to you. You're supposed to be keeping. Well, this is going to get fixed at the next General Assembly, we think. You're to keep presbyteries are expected to keep a register of certified educators and commissioned ruling elders. Where it actually currently says it means that you all have to do that, whether you're a synod or a session or a presbytery, but that's because it got put in the wrong place, but it's really intended that presbyteries are to do this, so we're putting it in the right place, we think, at the next assembly. So that's a responsibility. To preserve the council's records, that you make sure that all the records are preserved. You're going to hear from Margaret Merrick from the Historical Society, who's going to talk about record preservation. But that falls under your responsibility. And to furnish verified extracts when required by another council, so that if there's an action that your presbytery or synod took, that you can provide the actual wording for them when requested. If you want to know where it's found, G30104. You are also responsible for recommending how your records are to be kept safe, when they're to be sent off, how they're going to be kept either electronically or hard copies, and make that recommendation to your councils. You are also responsible for making sure that either annually or biannually, your proceedings and actions, your minutes, are reviewed. Presbytery reviews this, makes sure that the session records are reviewed. Synod makes sure that the presbytery records are reviewed. GA makes sure that the synod records are reviewed, so that there is a process for reviewing records. You also have responsibilities related to judicial process. You're going to hear from Lori Griffith, our manager of judicial process in constitutional services, but you as the stated clerk are usually the beginning point of judicial process. You receive written allegations. You also receive requests, say for information relating to a particular case. You are also expected to send requests and communications on relating to judicial process. You are to report all decisions that are reached by permanent judicial commissions to councils. It will often say that the stated clerk has to read to the and enter into the record the decision of a permanent judicial council, and provide any materials relating to cases. It's in a number of different places within the rules of discipline. Those responsibilities are listed. You also have a responsibility for receiving things. Letters of renunciation. You have ministers that have decided that they no longer want to be U.S.A, that you need to be able to receive those. Notification of certification. This is specifically related to certified Christian educators, but it also might be business administrators, any other kind of professional certifications. You're the person who will usually receive that. Written protests. If there's an action that a council took and somebody wishes to protest, there's a process for filing a written protest with the clerk. Your responsibility is to receive those. And administrative commission reports. If you have administrative commissions in working within your council, the expectation is that you will be the recipient of their eventual report. Then you have reporting responsibilities. You have a responsibility to report to your council renunciations. So if you have a minister who sends you a letter of renunciation, you have a response. The Book of Order states clearly that you receive that letter, that the renunciation goes into effect, that the day that that letter is received, and that you have a responsibility then to report that to your council. Ordinations. Your council knows that somebody got ordained, but we don't here in this office. Chris Valerius, you're going to be hearing from her. We need to hear that you've ordained somebody so that we know that they are a minister of Word and Sacrament in the U.S.A. So you need to make sure that you let us know that here. Again, certifications. You get a certified Christian educator or associate educator in your presbytery to let the council know that. And then when there are proposed amendments to the Constitution that come out of a General Assembly, we communicate with you, stated clerks. We send you those proposed amendments and expect that you're going to report back to us how your presbytery voted on those. Now so all of those were in the Book of Order. So if someone asks you, well, what exactly is your responsibility? Good luck on the 4 hours a week. I mean, for some presbyteries, those are the ones that are actually mandated by our Constitution. Now, these are more what I would say are kind of implied in the role of stated clerk. While it's not spelled out in our form of government, there is usually an expectation on behalf of your council that this is the role that you'll play. You are, in essence, the official communicator of your council. So in terms of the presbytery or synod, I'm assuming you're the one who says to your council, we're having a meeting. This is when it's going to be. This is how you register. These are the papers that you need to have in preparation for that meeting. And you're the one who lets everybody know that. There's also other presbytery information that or synod information that you may be passing along that's not related particularly to a meeting, but maybe communication that your presbytery or your synod wants to make sure that everybody has. That's really going to be dependent on what your particular situation is and how that's communicated. We have expectations here in the Office of the General Assembly of you as the official communicator for your council. As I said, you're going to hear from Chris Valerius about the statistical information. There is an expectation that you're going to fill out those statistical forms for your presbytery, and you're going to make sure that your congregations get that information so that they in turn can fill out that statistical information. That you're going to, if you don't already know about 5-part forms, that this lets us know when ministers move, get renounce, change positions within your presbytery, go to different presbyteries, retire, get ordained, all of those. We need to know those. Also, relating to candidates and inquirers, that you're going to hear from Tim Cargill later about the candidacy process, inquirers and candidates. There are forms that we need to receive here in this office, in the Office of the General Assembly, that we expect you to let us know when you have an inquirer, when somebody moves to candidacy, when they are ordained. Whoopsie. And then you're considered our official communicator when it comes to emails and mailings. When Chris Valerius sends out a quarterly mailing to you all relating to statistics and your 5-part forms, there's oftentimes other information in there that will be sent to you. So those go to you, which we expect you then disseminate within your council as appropriate. The other is emails, that when there's a particular thing brewing that we may think you need to know, we will send that to you in an email. A lot of times we'll also send it to your EP if you have one, or your executive for your synod if you have one. And sometimes those same emails might go to whoever's designated to your COM work or your CPM work. Church Leadership Connection is our online matching and referral system for positions, for teaching elders looking for positions, for educators looking for positions, and then for churches looking for church leadership. There is an expectation from Church Leadership Connection, who you'll also be hearing from later, is that you as the stated clerk have to sign off on the PIFs, the personal information forms of all ministers of Word and Sacrament. To just say, yeah, there's no charges pending or looking like they're coming down the pike, or that there are, this person is not functioning under any kind of supervised rehabilitation, that they really are free and clear to look for a call. And then GA actions and amendments. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to send those book of amendments to you, that you're going to make sure that those get voted on by your presbytery, and that you're in turn going to let us know that your presbytery has indeed voted on those and what the votes for those might be. This is what you mentioned earlier about big shoes. There is an expectation in many of our presbyteries that you as the stated clerk are going to be able to provide guidance for anybody relating to the Book of Order, presbytery policies and procedures, parliamentary procedure, judicial process, legal matters and risk management. And so all of those, which is probably more than you even know anything about. But you're the one that may be able to find where they can find that information. Doesn't mean you have to necessarily know it all, but if you can figure out who they need to contact to get the answers to their questions. Tom Hay is going to meet with you this afternoon and kind of go over some basic parliamentary procedures with you, so that you at least have some sense of that. So we'll try to provide you with what we have to help you do your work and being able to resource folks. Okay, other responsibilities. Well, again, it's not stated in the Book of Order that oftentimes the stated clerk is responsible relating to the council meetings in terms of planning. How many of you don't have meeting planning as part of your responsibilities? Okay. 4 hours a week. Yeah. Okay. So making sure that the council meetings are planned and thought through. Preparing the docket for that meeting. Knowing who's supposed to speak, when they're supposed to speak, what order things should be in, what reports need to be coming, all of those things. Working on that. Being the parliamentarian. How many of you are not expected to be the parliamentarian at your meetings? Is there somebody designated to do that?
We hire a parliamentarian.
You hire a parliamentarian. Oh, way to go. That's pretty nice. But how many of the rest of you are expected to be kind of the parliamentarian for that meeting? Yeah. Okay. Even if you're not, it's always a good idea to know sort of what should be happening. As parliamentarians, we are not infallible. And there is sometimes are gray areas on what a direction might be. So being prepared for that's good. And then how many of you are expected to be the recorder of the minutes during the meeting? Okay. So when I talk about recorder, that means actually during the meeting you're writing the minutes, sort of, or the whatever. But then the minutes, I'm talking about, okay, now you've taken all that and you put it together so that it actually makes sense and it looks like real minutes. So there's kind of a dual role responsibility for some of you. And some of you, it's simply a matter of making sure that the minutes are completed. You are ultimately responsible for the minutes, which it's your name that goes on there. So you want to make sure that it is an accurate representation of what transpired in that council meeting. And then there are oftentimes in those meetings reporting actions that need to be followed up on, that you need to notify somebody that the presbytery remove them from the rolls, or that the presbytery took this and such an action relating to the sale of your church property, or whatever it is, that there is often follow-up communication. This is part of your role as the communicators, to make sure that those actions on behalf of the council have been told to the people that impacts most. How many of you actually are expected to provide orientation for clerks of session? Yeah. Tell them how to kind of do their jobs, do some training with them. Again, that's not spelled out in the Book of Order, but a lot of times that is expected of the clerk for presbytery. Oftentimes we look to the clerk to provide permanent judicial commission orientation. How many of you know that that's part of your position, your responsibility? Okay. One of the things that Lori, when she talks to you, Lori will sometimes go to synods or can meet with a number of different PJCs. If you've got a PJC that's getting started, you might want to have her come and do some orientation training for you. As she says, I can do it in 4 hours. It's not very good in 4 hours, but I can do it in a day. So that there are opportunities that she can help you in doing orientation for your PJCs. GA commissioners. Our office expects that stated clerks orient their General Assembly commissioners. And we hopefully provide you with enough information to be able to do that, but that there would be in fact some orientation, specific orientation that is provided by you. How many of you do orientation for new commissioners to your council? It's a wonderful opportunity for you to help brand new commissioners to your council know how you function, because we all know that there are unwritten rules that you don't know are unwritten until you step in the middle of it and you go, oh no, that's not how we do that. So being able to help your new commissioners to your council understand how things work is often a wonderful opportunity that you can provide orientation for them. I add this, other responsibilities, self-awareness, one being one. Knowing your responsibilities. Now, I've told you what I think your responsibilities are, but it is really your position description. And then as we know, there are often unwritten rules, and some of that is that being able to resource folks answer their questions that may not even be written in your position description. So knowing what specifically your responsibilities are, first and foremost. And then respecting your council customs and traditions. The ways in which, doesn't mean you can't change those, but don't jump right in. No, understand that this is sort of how we function for the past 30 years. You might be able to raise questions about, and why is that? But to respect those traditions, because there are folks who know how to function under this with current traditions and customs, and so knowing what those are before you decide to consciously make some efforts to change those. Knowing the rules and policies and processes of your particular council. The opportunity as well as the challenge for this new form of government that we're living into is that many places it'll say, your own policies and processes, that this lets all of us have some opportunity to create policies and processes that work best for us. So, when somebody can call and say, well, can we do this? A lot of times the answer is, you can. Think it through. If this is the policy and process that you'd like to engage in your particular council, that's perfectly okay. But know what those are. A lot of times right at this point we're kind of living into those and creating those as we go along, but knowing what they are is important, and being able to translate to resource folks, to helping them understand that that's what there is. To also be using your power with care. You do indeed hold kind of almost a gatekeeper role, but it isn't meant to say no. It's meant to be able to facilitate and help people in process, and be able to get the answers that they need to questions, to be able to get the way in which they'd like things to work, especially like at a meeting, and how can they bring business to a meeting. It's not meant, your position is not meant to thwart somebody. It's really to help them live into what they're trying to do, and assist them in that process. So please use your power with care. Remaining certainly neutral and fair. When you're at a presbytery meeting, the expectation would be that I could go to my stated clerk and I could say, this is what I want to do. And you may think it's the most stupid idea in the entire world, and our presbytery would never vote for it, and we would think that's a terrible idea. However, it's my stupid idea. So you need to help me implement my, or bring my stupid idea. So so that the body can act on that. So help people do it kind of decently and in order so that it doesn't disrupt, and that they can hopefully bring business in a way that isn't perceived that you are stonewalling, that you have an agenda that you're trying to impose upon your council, and really being able to live into a role where you can help folks believe that you are fair to them. And then knowing when to ask for help. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to hear from a lot of folks. Know that we're a resource for you, and you can call anytime you want, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can and hopefully answer your questions, or direct you in a place where you might be able to find your answers. Resources. So you do have resources at your fingertips. First, our spiritual resources. Certainly, I always recommend that you're the person who, when you go to a council meeting, people can come to you and say, do you have a Bible? Now, granted, most of the time you're meeting in a church, and usually that's not a problem, but I've met at places where there were not Bibles, and everybody's scrambling, and people are whipping out their phones to use, see Dan's look, get it on your phone, but that you have access to a Bible at a meeting. The Book of Occasional Services, if you are not familiar with it, this is the one that is used for ordinations and installations, mission service, all of those. If your moderator doesn't have this, you can lend it out, but this needs to be a resource that you have at your fingertips. The hymnal, if you're going to, we got tons right here, but so that, there obviously is a worship component of any of your council meetings with prayer that you want to be prepared for in case somebody doesn't show up. The Book of Common Worship, you can use the whole big fat blue one, or this little daily prayer one is actually a good resource for being able to lead folks in prayer. Then there's polity resources. I still get calls from people who are using the old book. Now, you could get away with that. You could get away with that for a number of years because there were just generally a few changes. I mean, this is so different. You've got to get people to throw out their others and get these. I mean, so, they're quoting from, and you're going, no, that book doesn't work anymore. So making sure your folks have access to the new Book of Order. It is online in a PDF. People have no excuse for saying, I can't pay the $5 to get one. So you can send them to the website to get the PDF version of it. The book of, did you want to say something, Stephen?
What's the progress on the annotated for that?
We're going to talk about the annotated. Yeah. Okay. The Book of Confessions, make sure you have a copy of that handy. I honestly don't know whether it's available online. I'm sure it is, but yeah, I just carry that one around. This one is not available like this anymore, but you may have one in your presbytery office. It is available online. It's called the Companion to the Constitution. This is the one where we always send to people who say, well, how do you write bylaws? There's example bylaws in there. There's sample standing rules. So there's some resources in here that you can take advantage of.
So that's not available anymore?
Well, no, it's in print, like this.
Oh.
There may be you may have a hard copy. It's available online.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. But in your presbytery office, there may be one of these, actually hard copy. And then the Book of Order side by side. This, because this relates to the annotated book, which is the next one. The annotated Book of Order is online, which is how you can take the Book of Order, and under each section you can see where there were permanent judicial actions that actually ended up meaning you now have an authoritative interpretation related to that, or that the General Assembly itself made an authoritative interpretation, and some of the history of that particular section. What is currently online is the old Book of Order. because at this assembly, we've had a committee that's been working all year long to say which of those annotations from the old book apply to the new book. So there'll be a committee at the General Assembly that will vote on which of those carry over to the new form of government. So we don't have a current annotated book for the new form of government because we don't have the annotations yet. However, that doesn't mean you can't still use the annotated book. So online there is the Book of Order side by side, which takes the in our current form of government, the citation, what the comparable is in the old book, and then you go to the old book and the annotated book. You're going to learn more about this. And to say, here is where you can find this, and then go to the annotated book and look what's there. Does it kind of make sense? We're going to look in more detail at the annotated book in a little bit. And then the Stated Clerk's Handbook, which you all have a big copy of in this bag over here. We're going to go a little bit through this later, but this is it's really a kind of a resource for you. And we're not going to make you carry it home if you don't want to. If you want us to ship it to you, we'll do that. But we're going to go in, kind of go through that kind of quickly just to show you what's there. It's not late night reading from cover to cover. It's not a real good story to last the whole way through. But it is a resource that you can go to get some additional information. Parliamentary resources. This is brand new this year. Stated clerks need this one. I know, the other one is there, but you need to make sure you have the 11th edition. Yeah. The interesting thing about this is that there is a good section on electronic meetings, which is more expanded than the previous, which you may want to look at. We're going to talk a little bit about electronic meetings later. This little piece, Robert's Rules of Order in Brief. This is really, this is actually not a bad read. I really mean it as a read. This is more of a resource to talk about what parliamentary procedure is and how this, how it works in a more simplified fashion. We give these to moderators when the moderators conference is here every year. Jill gives these to them. I believe she gives them to the moderators, but because this just gives them a nice little tip. You also have in your folder this laminated cheat sheet, which we call it a cheat sheet because if you have it right in front of you at a meeting, it gives you the kind of the thumbnail sketch of what you can get away with and what takes precedent and whether it needs seconding and all of that. We just encourage you to be familiar with that. And then you're going to find that people are going to come to you at a meeting and they're going to say, well, what is our standing rule about that? And if nobody has a copy of it, how are you going to make a determination? So you need to have in your possession, some way, shape, or form, your council bylaws and standing rules. And you probably should know what's in there so that you know that you can go back, so that if in fact somebody's trying to do something that is contrary to your bylaws or standing rules, that you can at least say, I think we have something that says something about that, and be able to find that. So have that at your fingertips. Web resources. These are our web. I'm actually going to take you there and show you a couple things. There is lots on our website for anything, everything. But what I just want to direct you to are some of our constitutional services resources. We have for you advisory opinions, constitutional musings, which are advisory opinions are kind of our office's opinion about a particular thing based upon the form of government. It is not an authoritative interpretation, but it's our best understanding of what something may mean. So there's a number of them that are offered there on various topics. So if you look there, whoopsie, trip over this. Okay, so a lot of these just relating to particular topics. If you're looking for something in particular, you may be able to find some help there. Our most recent advisory opinion related to G60106B, what did the Assembly do? So that if somebody says, I will tell you that we get in our office, well, my understanding now is that we have to ordain a gay or lesbian, and if we don't, we're going to be brought up on charges. Which, if you want people to understand what it really means, this is a helpful piece, because that is not true. So help people understand what the action was and what it means for their particular council. Then there's constitutional musings, which are more related to kind of a particular topic that's kind of come up, and our understanding of, what this may mean in a more thoughtful, our most thoughtful way. Our most recent one has to do with joint congregational witness, which is if you used to have federated churches, united churches, this is the new term in our new form of government, is joint congregational witness. There is far less regulatory ways in which those are set up in our new form of government, and so this has some information about how we think that this really gets lived out in your councils if you have some churches that are wanting to establish a joint congregational witness. Let's see. We recently hosted a church conflict and negotiation seminar for clerks and other presbytery and synod staff, and there's a variety of resources that are available there for your use, which you might actually find quite helpful as you're dealing with any conflict within your presbyteries. The Historical Society has done some just wonderful things about pulling together some historical stuff about the history of conflict within the U.S.A, well, within the Presbyterian Church in America, not PCA, but the Presbyterian Church in the United States of America. And it's really quite good, and Fred has put together some of that, so that information is available. And then resources for dealing with negotiations. If your presbytery is dealing with negotiating with congregations that are considering leaving the denomination, you might find some of these resources available to you to be quite helpful. Also within our office, we have the Office of Immigration Issues. Melissa G. is our staff person in this area. If you have any issues relating to the immigration status of any ministers coming into your presbytery, or issues relating to advocacy as well, relating to immigration issues, Melissa is a great resource, and this website has some information as well for you. We certainly encourage you that if you have any, as you're bringing ministers into your presbytery, that you're always clear what their immigration status is, even if they don't look like they may not have an immigration status problem. That you check that out with everyone, that they are able, so that it doesn't mean that they can't come and serve your church. It just means you got to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So making sure those things are done. So those are resources that you have available to you here. This is also a way that you can get to the other information about the most recent PJC decisions, Safe Churches and Sexual Misconduct. The Advisory Committee on the Constitution meets a couple times a year. Most recently they met to prepare their understanding of how some of the overtures that are coming to General Assembly relate to the Constitution, and if they have any insights or advice relating to that. And that's probably enough for now.
Joyce,
Yes.
I think maybe it sounds as a joke, but one of the things is very important, especially in the immigration issue, is to know where the person come from. Because we have our ministry of San Juan Presbytery. He can move from the state because the COM asked, the chairman of the COM of that presbytery asked for the green card. And they said, if you don't give me the green card, we can process your transfer. But Puerto Rican don't have any
Green cards.
And
Yeah.
he said to that person many times that
Yeah.
we don't need it, we don't use it. You know?
Yeah.
And he's still he living here in the state, but his membership is still in San Juan.
If there's any doubt, call Melissa. She'll help you. But yeah, and some of that's just ignorance in what the law really says. So anyway, so that's some of the resources available to you on our website. Hello. Hello. Here it comes slowly. Okay. Okay. So that's just some of them available to you. There. Very slow. Okay, now we're going to talk about minutes, keeping minutes. Now this stuff that I'm giving you, well not this. The palest ink is better than the best memory. This is the whole purpose of minutes. Okay? That's actually some kind. I read that on a tea bag thingy majiggy, so I thought that was good for stated clerks. Yeah. Okay, this is from Robert's Rules. Okay? First paragraph. The kind of meeting, the name of the assembly, meaning the Synod of Alaska Northwest or the Presbytery of Santa Fe or whatever. The date, time, and place of the meeting. The moderator and the stated clerk are present, or that there are substitutes. Who's serving as the moderator, who's serving as the stated clerk, and that it is opened with prayer. Sometimes approval of previous minutes depends on your presbytery. Some presbyteries give that responsibility to their, what used to be called councils, whatever, the presbytery or synod, some executive committee or whatever. And that somehow the previous minutes have been approved in some way, shape, or form. The body of the minutes. A separate paragraph for each subject matter. All main motions and dispositions, that those are in there, what happened to them. Secondary motions that were not lost or withdrawn, like amendments, and especially when necessary for clarity, so that people know what happened. Any committee reports, the substance of their reports. A lot of presbyteries, those presbytery actions are done by bodies, commissions, committees elsewhere, and it's just reported to presbytery, but the substance of those committee reports need to be in the minutes. And then any points of order and appeals, whether sustained or lost, and that includes whether they're lost because you could end up with a remedial case. Somebody says, you didn't do this right. You've got to be able to tell them what happens, okay? Including the moderator's reasons for ruling, if the moderator gave any reasons for ruling. So make sure that that's included as well. And then at the end, the adjournment time, closed with prayer. Obviously, the opened and closed with prayer, that doesn't come from Roberts, that comes from our Constitution. Okay, I'm just adding those to you for Roberts. And the signature of the stated clerk. That those have to be in your minutes. Now, Roberts also has some other things which I'm not sure everybody always does, what I would call the other rules and practices. The name of the maker of the motion. Most presbyteries don't do that. Roberts says you should, whatever, but you don't have to name the seconder. The voting of the numbers, that if you had to vote by number, we counted the number of hands or we counted by ballot, that you need to include that count. Don't include the committee of the whole or quasi-committee of the whole. If your presbytery or synod breaks into, we're going to do this kind of committee of the whole process, you don't have to, you just say that you did it, but you don't have to put the whole proceedings in there. Don't summarize the remarks of speakers. Transcriptions of minutes, the word for word are not the minutes. Just know that. So there's a whole in Roberts in page 468, 471 about how to do minutes. We just want to be able to know what happened at the council meeting that you were at, that people could go back and find out what really transpired. Any questions about minutes? Okay. Rolls and registers.
Well, just one,
Yeah.
because I have pondered it for years. So the maker of the motion, it's preferred that they're named, not the seconder. So M/P or MSP. That's so common.
Right.
Does it really? Is that just becoming standard and it'll evolve?
Do it however you'd like. I mean, that's part of some of it is that part of the custom. I mean, Roberts would tell you that you got to put the maker's name in there. I don't know of any presbytery that does that. They just do like what you say, moved, seconded, and passed. So, okay, this is not the kind of roll I'm referring to. The rolls and registers that you're expected to keep. Inquirers and candidates, teaching elder members, including not engaged in validated ministry. We used to call that inactive. We don't. Now it's just not engaged in validated ministry. And you got to keep track of this because after 3 years you can remove them. And how do you know if 3 years have passed if you haven't kept track of that? So you need to keep track of that. Certified Christian educators and associate Christian educators, and ruling elders commissioned to particular service. The other thing is you have to keep track of your former PJC members. This is found in the Book of Discipline, and this is because if you have a PJC case that you've got to call together the PJC and someone is not available, you're expected to go to the register of previous PJC members to be able to fill the PJC. Okay, let's talk a little bit about meetings. Does that look like your Presbyterian meeting, by the way? The type of meeting. There's generally 3 types of meetings. Stated meeting, which is your normal, regular old meeting. The special or called meeting for a particular purpose. The call usually includes, this is a special meeting or a called meeting of the Presbytery of Santa Fe for the purpose of examination for ordination of candidate so-and-so. That's the only item of business. And then sometimes an annual meeting, depends on what your bylaws say. Some presbyteries designate one of their stated meetings as being the annual meeting, where the annual reports of various committees are given, or whatever your bylaws may say. So if your presbytery has one, fine. If they don't, it's not the end of the world either. So, and that notice of meeting. Your expectation is that you're going to give notice of the meetings. You're going to make sure that it's adequate notice. That how that gets transmitted is done differently in different presbyteries, but you're going to make sure that that's out there. That the materials are available ahead of time. That everything that can be is either distributed in the way that you normally do that, whether you post it online, whether you actually physically. Anybody still physically mail stuff? Yay. And docket preparation in consultation with the moderator of Presbytery. Remember, the meeting belongs to the moderator to run, not you. And then you're going to meet with that moderator ahead of time. You're going to make sure that you're all on the same page, you know what's going to happen, that you're prepared for the meeting. So hopefully nothing's going to happen. And you know, generally, as you're putting together the docket, where are those sticky points that you may have some difficulties or may have particularly lengthy debate, and planning ahead for those difficult times. What are some things that you can do in this particular section of a meeting if it kind of disintegrates? You know, what are some ways to call us back to prayer or whatever? And planning those ahead of time. I was always relieved even when you were planning all of this, when none of that happened. It was like, wow, what a gift. But sometimes if you're not prepared, you can really find yourself in a really sticky situation and sometimes get really bogged down in parliamentary process. So anticipating that ahead of time. Okay, know who you are, stated clerk, and what you do, clerky stuff, and what you don't do, moderator stuff. Again, your role is to be a resource for the moderator. So you want to make sure that, I always think I've done a good job if I haven't had to say anything out loud to the moderator. If you've got a good moderator and you've planned ahead and they feel pretty comfortable with parliamentary procedure, you might just have to pass a couple of notes maybe, or they may turn to you and ask for a simple question. But be real clear that your role is just to be the resource to the moderator, that they're the one who kind of controls what's happening in the meeting, not you. Moderator presides, stated clerk advises. You need to keep track of business in the order of the day. You're the second set of eyes. You're the second person paying attention. The moderator has a lot on his or her plate, so it's really good for you to be able to back them up. If they say, whoops, where are we? And you can tell them right exactly where you are. Know where you are in the parliamentary process. Try not to let your mind wander, especially when it starts to get sticky with amendments and amendments to amendments. And so making sure you have following along where you are so that you can advise the moderator. Have a recording secretary if possible. I know some of you are recording secretaries. It's really hard. Research says you cannot multitask. Being the recording secretary really means that you can't, in some respects, be parliamentarian. You can try, but it may be difficult. It's because you're following different things if you're recording or if you're following parliamentary procedure and trying to advise a moderator. So maybe you're wonderful and can do both, but I couldn't. Stay in the meeting. Don't leave the room. Because how can you follow along what's going on? And stuff may hit the fan just as soon as you've walked out the door, and your moderator is left bereft without their backup, which is you. And don't forget, you have to do the post-meeting business. The minutes, the correspondence, the notifications, all of those things you've got to make sure are done. Which may include, I don't know if it falls in your bailiwick, the thank you note to the church that hosted the Presbyterian meeting, you know. Let's see, okay. Let's talk a little bit about electronic meetings. You have to maintain the ability to be a deliberative body if you're doing an electronic meeting. That means that everybody hears everybody, that everybody can talk, that everybody can participate in that meeting. It is recommended in Roberts that you spell out how that's done in your standing rules, so that if you're ever going to have a non-face-to-face meeting, that people understand this is how we do it here in the Synod of Alaska Northwest. You know, that these are the standards in which we make sure that the deliberative body can still meet and hear one another. Making sure there is adequate notice. Just like any other meeting, you have to have adequate notice. Ensure in the meeting that all can be heard and all can hear. Especially if it's just a conference call, or if you're doing Skype, or whatever. If you've got two locales of geographic. I know I've heard of presbyteries that have tried to do this because of distance. That they'll have one locale one place and another place. Set up Skype interview, making sure that people can all can hear what's going on and be heard. If you're doing a conference call, you want to make sure there's roll call, so you know who is on the call, who is in attendance, because meetings of presbytery, of synod, attendance is kept. So you need to know who's there, not just all in favor say aye, and you have no idea if there's 10 people or 35. That's a little much for a conference call, but. Email exchange doesn't do it. Now we all know that presbytery sometimes will send an email in their committee to everybody. Does anybody think this is a bad idea? Now, is anybody going to bring remedial charges against them for probably what they're doing? Not necessarily. But email exchanges really is not a deliberative body. It could be argued. So, again, spell out how you do it in your standing rules. Okay, your relationships with other folks. How many of you are the executive stated clerk? We're seeing more and more, especially on the presbytery level and synod level, that the executive and the stated clerk are the same person. So if you have a good relationship with yourself, you're doing all right. But you do have a responsibility to have a good working relationship with all of these folks I'm going to mention. Administrative staff. Some of you have administrative staff who will actually do some of the physical work that is expected of the clerk, whether it's writing the minutes themselves or whatever. But how you work with them is going to be important. Moderators and elected leaders of various presbytery or synod committees, executive committees, all of those, understanding what that relationship is, how you relate to them, how they relate to you. Part of it is because you, as the communicator of the things that have been going on in various councils, if nobody's telling you that COM received 3 members from the presbyteries, elsewhere, how are you going to know to write for that? To let them know, let the stated clerk of those presbyteries know that they've been received. If they aren't going to communicate with you, how do you pass that information along? Okay, committee on ministry particularly, and preparation for ministry particularly, because those are the real pieces where you're going to have to be corresponding, relating to when somebody is received as an inquirer, as a candidate within our system here in the Office of the General Assembly. We need to know that. Committee on ministry in terms of transferring ministers to other presbyteries and within the presbytery, that you need to be the one that fills those the 5-part form out for that. So you need to understand their roles and responsibilities within those various committee structures within your council, and then help them understand how you relate to them. How many of you actually staff some committees within your presbytery or synod? Okay, so you just need to make sure that everybody understands how you relate to them in those responsibilities that you have with those committees. The point is to be able to work together for the benefit of the presbytery, for the synod, and understand that reporting is a two-way street. You have a responsibility to report, which means they have a responsibility to report to you, and vice versa, you to them. We have received the letter of transfer of Reverend Jones from the Presbytery of Shenandoah Valley. All good to go. That communication happens as a two-way street. Again, back to the record keeping, making sure that the records of the presbytery, if you were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, would anybody know where to find any of the stuff? Or, oh gosh, they haven't kept the records up for the past year. They're planning to do it on a weekend next weekend. I'll tell you, we got them. So it would be no one in this room. And then communicate, communicate, communicate. That is the key to making sure that you have open lines of communication with all of those folks that you're going to have a relationship with, so that the work of the presbytery or the synod can be done well. Okay, that's my dead end.